Every image you have ever seen of bioluminescence was made for you. The glowing bay in Puerto Rico, the blue sparks in a breaking wave, the ethereal, translucent jellyfish drifting through a nature documentary with soft music underneath it. Beautiful, otherworldly. The internet's favorite version of the deep ocean, packaged as wonder, served as wallpaper. All of it is a misrepresentation, not of the biology. The chemistry is real. The light is real. The organisms are real. The misrepresentation is in what it implies, that bioluminescence is a spectacle, that it exists to be admired, that the deep ocean glows the way a city glows at night, warmly, indiscriminately, for the benefit of anyone watching. At 2,200 meters, that framing collapses completely. Here is the true part that sounds like a rewrite. At 2,200 meters, bioluminescence is not decoration. It is not communication in the warm sense of the word. It is not a signal of abundance or health or beauty. It is the primary weapons system of an ecosystem running on almost no energy, in total darkness, where every calorie is borrowed against a debt that cannot always be repaid. At 2,200 meters, light is how you hunt. It is how you lie. It is how you blind something before it eats you. It is how you call a larger predator to kill the one that is currently killing you. It is how you project a false identity. It is how you see prey that cannot see you seeing it. Every organism here is either carrying a weapon made of light, actively defending against one, or at this exact moment being killed by one. So what is bioluminescence really doing at this depth? And how did a single biochemical trick become the most versatile, most reinvented, most tactically sophisticated tool in the deep ocean's arsenal? Let's descend to 2,200 meters and understand what we're stepping into. In the previous episode, we watched light die at 400 meters, the last blue photon of sunlight collapsing into permanent darkness. We met the twilight zone animals that evolved counter-illumination, the strategy of matching your belly's glow to the faint light above in order to erase your own silhouette from predators below. Bioluminescence there was still, at its core, a defensive response to ambient light, a way of blending in, a way of managing visibility in a world where sunlight still set the terms. At 2,200 meters, that world is gone, long gone. You pass the last trace of sunlight more than 1,800 meters above your current position. You pass the deep scattering layer, the migrating mass of lanternfish and krill we explored in an earlier episode, somewhere around 700 meters. The organisms that commute to the surface every night to feed do not come this far down. This depth is not a commute stop. It is a permanent address. The bathypelagic zone, the scientific name for the layer between 1,000 and 4,000 meters, is also called the midnight zone, not because it is dark in the way a moonless night is dark. It is dark in a way that has no surface equivalent. A moonless night still has starlight, atmospheric scatter, the faint thermal glow of the ground. At 2,200 meters, there is no light of any kind that did not originate inside a living body. Zero. The darkness here is not the absence of enough light. It is the complete, total, non-negotiable absence of all light from any non-biological source. Pressure at 2,200 meters is approximately 220 atmospheres, 220 times the weight of the sky pressing in from every direction. Water temperature sits between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius, cold enough that your body would enter fatal hypothermia within minutes. The seafloor is still nearly 2,000 meters further below. You are suspended in open water, in the middle of the largest consistently dark habitat on the planet, with marine snow drifting past you at a centimeter per hour, and the nearest reliable food source being whatever swims within striking distance. This is the environment that shaped every strategy you are about to hear, and here is the foundational rule that governs all of it. At 2,200 meters, Food is so catastrophically scarce that the cost of a failed hunt may be survival. You cannot afford to chase and miss. You cannot afford to burn calories on speculation. You cannot afford to be seen when you are not ready to be seen. Every behavior, every adaptation, every use of light at this depth has been sculpted by that single, brutal constraint. Energy is the currency. Light is the weapon. And the rules of engagement are nothing like what the glowing bay photographs implied. Before we meet the hunters, it is worth understanding what bioluminescence actually is, because the chemistry tells you something important about why it became so dominant here. Bioluminescence is a chemical reaction. Luciferin, the light-producing substrate, is oxidized by an enzyme called luciferase in the presence of oxygen. The reaction releases energy almost entirely as light, with almost no heat. This is what scientists call cold light, and the efficiency of it is extraordinary. A standard incandescent light bulb converts roughly 5% of its energy input into visible light and wastes the remaining 95% as heat. Bioluminescence converts chemical energy to photons at efficiencies approaching 100%. Almost nothing is lost. Almost nothing is wasted. In a world where energy is the most precious thing, this matters enormously. What matters equally is that bioluminescence has been invented by evolution not once, not 5 times, but at least 40 to 50 times independently across the tree of life. Bacteria, fish, squid, jellyfish, crustaceans, worms, fungi, entirely unrelated lineages arrived at the same fundamental solution through completely separate evolutionary pathways. In evolutionary biology, when the same solution appears over and over across independent lineages, it is called convergent evolution, and it is the clearest possible signal that the solution is correct, that it works, that the selective pressure demanding it is real and consistent and ancient. Bioluminescence is the most convergently evolved trait in the ocean's history. The light produced by nearly all bioluminescent marine organisms falls in the blue-green range, wavelengths between roughly 450 and 490 nanometers. This is not a coincidence. Blue-green light penetrates seawater more efficiently than any other wavelength. It is the last color standing, as we saw in the Twilight Zone episode. An organism at 2,200 meters that produces red light would be nearly invisible at distance, even to an animal that could detect red wavelengths, because water would absorb it within a few meters. Blue-green light travels. Blue-green light is detectable at distances that matter to a predator or a mate searching in open water. The ocean essentially prescribed the color of its own weapon system. There is one exception, and it is one of the most remarkable evolutionary stories at this depth. But we will get there. The anglerfish is the image most people carry when they think of deep-sea bioluminescence. The grotesque silhouette, the enormous jaws, the glowing lure dangling from a modified spine above the snout like a fishing rod the fish grew itself. It is so iconic it has become almost cartoonish, and that familiarity has dulled the actual strangeness of what the anglerfish represents. Which is the most energy-efficient hunting strategy ever evolved by a vertebrate? The lure, called the esca, is a bulb of modified tissue at the tip of a structure called the elysium, a spine that detached from the dorsal fin over millions of years of evolution and migrated forward over the head until it positioned itself directly in front of the mouth. Inside the esca, bioluminescent bacteria living in a controlled symbiosis with the fish. The bacteria produce continuous blue-green light. The anglerfish controls the light's visibility through muscular tissue that can expose or cover the esca like a shutter. It can make the lure pulse. It can vary rhythm and intensity. It can produce a flickering pattern that, to prey moving through the water column, resembles the bioluminescent signature of small organisms they normally hunt. The lure is not just a light. It is a fabricated identity, a performance. a deception broadcast into the darkness saying, "Here is something small and safe and worth approaching." The anglerfish does not move toward its prey. It does not chase. It waits, nearly motionless, with a metabolic rate calibrated to the minimum necessary to sustain life. The jaw opens in less than 6 milliseconds, one of the fastest jaw strike speeds in the animal kingdom, and can expand to accommodate prey larger than the anglerfish's own body. The stomach stretches. The prey, drawn in by the light, has no warning and no exit. This is the logical conclusion of deep-sea energy economics. When you cannot afford to miss, you eliminate the chase entirely. You create the conditions where prey comes to you, where the prey's own behavior, following light sources, becomes the mechanism of its death. The female anglerfish can reach 30 centimeters or more in length. The male anglerfish, in some species, reaches less than 3 centimeters. He is born with no digestive system mature enough to sustain independent feeding. He has one biological purpose: to find a female before his energy reserves run out. His eyes and nostrils are large and highly developed relative to his body, optimized entirely for detecting the chemical and visual signature of a female at distance. When he finds her, he bites into her skin. Enzymes from his mouth begin digesting the boundary between his tissue and hers. His circulatory system fuses to her circulatory system. His eyes degenerate. His internal organs no longer needed atrophy. He becomes a permanent attachment, a small protrusion on her body, vascularly connected, sharing her bloodstream, contributing sperm on demand and nothing else. Some females carry multiple males simultaneously fused to different parts of their body. The male anglerfish did not evolve to be a predator. He evolved to become infrastructure. In a place this dark, this scarce, this demanding, finding a mate is nearly as difficult as finding food. The fusion strategy eliminates the problem permanently. Once found, the mate is never lost again. Not every organism at 2,200 meters hunts with a lure. Some fight with light in ways that are faster, more reactive, and more tactically immediate. Consider the problem from the prey's perspective. You are a small squid at 2,200 meters. Your eyes are among the most light-sensitive organs in the animal kingdom, deep-sea vision, built for detecting single photons in near-total darkness, is the sensory equivalent of a camera with an exposure setting permanently fixed to maximum sensitivity. It is exquisitely tuned to function in the darkest possible environment, which means it is catastrophically vulnerable to sudden brightness. A deep-sea predator lunges toward you. In the fraction of a second before contact, you release an intense, instantaneous burst of bioluminescence directly toward it. Not a glow, a flash. An abrupt detonation of blue-green light at close range, directly into photoreceptors calibrated to detect individual photons. The effect on those photoreceptors is the same as a camera flash in a pitch-black room, temporary, total bleaching of the visual field. The predator's retinal cells are overwhelmed. For the critical seconds it takes its visual system to recover, it is functionally blind. You are already gone. This is the bioluminescent flash-in flee defense, and it has been documented in multiple squid species, crustaceans, and other invertebrates at bathypelagic depths. The weapon is light itself, deployed not as a searchlight, but as a concussive force against a sensory system tuned too sensitively for its own protection. But there is a third use of bioluminescence at this depth that is arguably the most counterintuitive of all, one that reframes the idea of what a signal is for. When a small organism at 2,200 meters is seized by a predator, it has only milliseconds before the encounter is fatal. Flight is no longer possible. Physical resistance is meaningless. But some organisms in the instant of capture release a burst of bioluminescence, not directed at the predator holding them, but broadcast outward into the surrounding water column. The signal is not an escape attempt. It is a distress call aimed at something larger. Scientists call this the burglar alarm hypothesis. The logic is as follows. The organism that has just seized you is a predator. But in the deep ocean, predators are also prey. Something larger is always somewhere in the water column above, below, or beside you. By broadcasting a bioluminescent pulse at the moment of capture, the prey animal is advertising the location of its attacker to anything in the vicinity that outranks it on the food chain. The prey may still die, but so might the predator, drawn into the attention of something it cannot handle, arriving within seconds, following the light. We explored the vampire squid in an earlier episode in this series. Its bioluminescent mucus cloud, ejected from the arm tips when threatened, functions on exactly this principle. The cloud glows. It marks a location. It does not help the vampire squid escape by blinding anyone. It draws attention to the point of disturbance and makes the attacker's position known to the surrounding darkness. In the deep ocean, calling for backup is a documented survival strategy, and the call is made with light. Now for the exception. The one that breaks the rule that bioluminescence is always blue-green. The dragonfish, a family of elongated, dark-bodied predators in the order Stomiiformes, are among the most physically arresting animals at bathypelagic depths. They carry a bioluminescent chin barbel, photophores along their flanks, and in some species, a suborbital light organ positioned just below each eye like a headlamp mounted on a skull. In most dragonfish species, these lights function normally blue-green, visible to the animals around them, used for communication and standard predatory deception. But three genera within this family, Malacosteus, Aristostomias, and Pachystomias, evolved something that appears at first glance to be a biological mistake. They produce red light. Red wavelengths, above roughly 650 nanometers, are absorbed by seawater within a few meters at most. More critically, the eyes of almost every animal in the bathypelagic zone are built exclusively around blue-green sensitivity. Their photoreceptors contain visual pigments tuned to short wavelengths, because that is all that has ever been relevant at this depth. Long wavelengths, red, have never arrived here in meaningful quantities from any natural source. There has been no evolutionary pressure to develop the machinery to detect them. Which means red light at 2,200 meters is, to essentially every organism in the water column, completely invisible. The dragonfish that produce it did not make a mistake. They unlocked a private channel. These dragonfish independently evolved both the ability to produce red bioluminescence and, crucially, the ability to see it. Their eyes contain a sensitizer derived from chlorophyll breakdown products absorbed through the food chain, which shifts the sensitivity of their visual pigments into the red range. They can illuminate the water around them in a wavelength that functions as a searchlight for them, and as nothing, absolute nothing, for their prey. Prey illuminated by a dragonfish's red suborbital light organ is lit up in full detail from the dragonfish's perspective and remains in complete, uninterrupted darkness from its own perspective. It does not know it is visible. It does not know it is being watched. It continues behaving as if it is alone in the dark, because by every measure available to it, it is. The dragonfish hunts with a wavelength its prey cannot see. It is the deep-sea equivalent of infrared targeting, a private frequency owned exclusively by the predator, invisible to every other party in the engagement. Evolution independently invented this in 3 separate lineages. 3 separate times, across 3 separate genetic histories, the same tactic was discovered. Find a wavelength no one else can see and use it to see everything. Pull back now to the scale of the ecosystem. At 2,200 meters in the bathypelagic zone, an estimated 90% of all macroscopic organisms produce some form of bioluminescence. 90%. This is not a quirky adaptation shared by a handful of specialists. It is the defining characteristic of the most volumetrically massive, consistently dark habitat on Earth. Think about what that means in ecological terms. At the surface, the fundamental energy currency of the ecosystem is sunlight. Solar photons drive photosynthesis. Photosynthesis produces organic carbon. Organic carbon enters the food web. Every predator-prey interaction, every growth cycle, every metabolic process at the surface traces its energy back to the sun. At 2,200 meters, sunlight is not absent in the way a cloudy day is absent of direct light. It is absent in the way it is absent on the moon. No photon from the sun has ever reached this water. Photosynthesis is not possible. The solar energy economy does not extend here. What extends here is marine snow, the slow rain of organic particles from above, the repackaged energy of the sunlit surface world, filtered through the twilight zone and arriving at this depth at a fraction of its original quantity. It sustains the ecosystem, but it does not power the sensory world. The sensory world at 2,200 meters runs on self-generated light, the anglerfish's lure, the dragonfish's red headlamps, the burglar alarm flash of a seized copepod, the blinding strobe of an escaping squid, the photophore patterns along a fish's flank that identify species and reproductive status to a potential mate in total darkness. These are not supplementary signals in an environment where vision already functions. They are the entire visual infrastructure of the ecosystem. Every optical transaction, every detection event, every act of predation or escape or mate recognition that involves light produced, controlled, and interpreted by the animals themselves. The deep ocean at this depth does not receive light. It manufactures it. And it manufactures it with extraordinary specificity. No bioluminescent signal at 2,200 meters is accidental or ambient. Every pulse, every sustained glow, every burst is a targeted communication with a biological cost attached. In a place where energy is the limiting resource, no organism wastes a photon. Every light produced here carries intent. There is one more dimension to this story, and it is uncomfortable. Almost everything we know about the bathypelagic zone, every observation, every video, every specimen collection was gathered using tools that we brought down with us. Remotely operated vehicles equipped with powerful floodlights, trawl nets that rip through the water column at speed, submersibles with halogen or LED arrays that illuminate the surrounding water for meters in every direction. At the surface, or in the twilight zone, this causes disruption. Animals avoid the lights or are attracted to them. Behavior changes. At 2,200 meters, the disruption is categorically different. These animals have evolved in a world where the brightest light ever produced by any source is the brief, localized flash of a single organism's bioluminescent defense. A burst that might reach a few meters at most before being swallowed by the dark. Their photoreceptors are calibrated to detect single photons. Their nervous systems are built around the assumption that any light they encounter is biological in origin, targeted in nature, and requires an immediate behavioral response. An ROV descending into this environment with operational floodlights is not an observation platform. It is an event, an intrusion so visually extreme that the animals around it, whose entire sensory world is organized around faint, directional, biologically produced light, have no evolutionary context for processing it. Some freeze, some scatter, some approach, drawn by the signal intensity. All of them behave differently than they would in the absence of the ROV. Scientists are beginning to acknowledge what this means. We may have never observed normal bathypelagic behavior. Every film, every census count, every behavioral study conducted with light-equipped vehicles was conducted in an environment the vehicles themselves had already fundamentally altered. The animals we watched were not acting naturally. They were reacting to us. The true ecology of the midnight zone, the behaviors, the interaction rates, the predator-prey dynamics, the full range of bioluminescent communication, may still be largely unknown. Not because we haven't looked, because every time we look, we change what we're looking at. The deep ocean at 2,200 meters has its own light economy, and we keep crashing it with a floodlight. Here is the reframe that this episode demands. We brought bioluminescence up to the surface and made it beautiful. We found it in bays and waves and aquarium tanks and shallow water jellyfish, and framed it as one of nature's decorative gestures, evidence that the ocean is magical, that the world has more wonder in it than our ordinary days suggest. That framing is not wrong. It is just the surface fraction of a much deeper story. At 2,200 meters, bioluminescence is not decoration. It is not wonder for wonder's sake. It is the technological foundation of an ecosystem. It is the currency in which every transaction between predator and prey, between potential mates, between the organism and the dark, is conducted. It is a chemistry so efficient it wastes almost nothing. A tool so useful that evolution reinvented it 50 times across 50 separate lineages over hundreds of millions of years. An arms race so sophisticated that one branch of it produced organisms capable of hunting in a wavelength that the rest of the ecosystem cannot perceive. The anglerfish lure is not glowing because the deep ocean is beautiful. It is glowing because something is about to die. The dragonfish's red headlamps are not glowing because the abyss is magical. They are glowing because something is being watched without knowing it. The burglar alarm flash of a captured copepod is not glowing because the ocean is wondrous. It is glowing because it is the last available move in a situation with no other options. Every light at this depth is purposeful. Every light is tactical. Every light is a calculated expenditure in the most energy-scarce neighborhood on Earth. The beauty is real. We are not wrong to see it. But the next time you look at a photograph of something glowing blue in the deep ocean, understand what you are actually looking at. You are looking at a weapon system. You are looking at the visual language of an arms race. You are looking at light that evolution decided was worth spending when almost nothing else was. That is not less beautiful, it is more. This series has now crossed 400 meters, descended past 1,700 meters with the vampire squid, moved through 2,200 meters in the midnight zone, tracked plastic to 5,500 meters, and watched bone-eating worms work the abyssal floor. Every depth has its own operating system, its own rules, its own currency, its own logic for survival. Next episode, we go to a place that breaks one of the most fundamental assumptions in all of biology, that life requires the sun. We're going to hydrothermal vents, cracks in the seafloor where superheated water loaded with hydrogen sulfide and minerals erupts into the cold abyss, and where entire ecosystems, tube worms 2 meters tall ghostly white crabs, thick mats of chemosynthetic bacteria live and die without a single calorie derived from sunlight. Life that runs on chemistry instead of light. No solar energy, no marine snow, no connection to the surface world at all. It sounds like science fiction. Every part of it is happening right now, on the floor of the Pacific Ocean. Hit like and subscribe if you want to go there.